This $1 bill that I have in my hand is now worth more than it was worth a year ago. And I know that some of you may be a little confused. What I'm alluding to is that we now have a very strong dollar. And a strong dollar means that it is measured against other world currencies. For example, the dollar versus the British pound sterling has gone up more than 16% in 2022. Or the dollar versus the euro, which the dollar has gone up over 14% in 2022. So the dollar is now reaching sky high levels than it has been in many years. And that right there, my friend, it is bad for business. And I know some people may not understand exactly why that is bad for business, because one could think that, a strong dollar is probably good because that allows you to have more purchasing power, especially overseas. But that is not quite the case. And what we've seen recently is, especially with everything that is going on in the world right now, and with fears of recession, with high inflation, and all these different things that are going on right now, that US companies have started to post lower and lower and lower revenues. And the earnings, as we are in the earnings season right now, things are looking pretty bad. With the likes of some of the big tech companies that have always had crazy earnings. When you look at companies like, for example, Amazon, you look at companies like Apple, Microsoft, and Meta or ex-Facebook, they all basically posted lower earnings. And that right there is also one of the reasons is because of a strong dollar. And so in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to try and look at what are the reasons that have made the US dollar strong, and what are the ramifications of the US dollar on the US economy and the world economy in general. And so if you are up for that, please allow me to ask you to hit that like button, and hey, if you like the content, subscribe as well. So the reason why the US dollar is getting stronger in 2022 is because the US dollar, in an environment like the environment in which we are living in, with all the fears and everything that is going on, the US dollar has become a safe haven. And what I mean by a safe haven is because a safe haven is basically the currency is considered to be safe, where more people into the world decides to put their money, decide to put their wealth in US dollars. And so the more demand for the currency, hence the higher its value goes up, because everyone look at for example, when we go in Europe, and with the war in Ukraine and with the energy crisis going on in Ukraine. And then when you look at the United States is energy sufficient, meaning that our energy doesn't come from those countries out there. We are energy sufficient. We produce our own stuff. We make everything here. And so because we are energy sufficient, we don't have energy pressures or energy headwinds pushing on us. And that basically tells people like, hey, you know what? Maybe I should put my money into the US dollar. And the second thing is also the higher inflation that the US dollar has. And hence, because of the higher inflation, we've seen the Federal Reserve, or basically the Central Bank of the United States, basically increasing the interest rates, right? And so what happens is when you start increasing the interest rates, now government bonds, which are basically debt, become more and more and more interesting to people, because the higher the interest rate, the higher the return on the bond that you own. And so, or the debts that you own. And so now people put their money in like the US government bonds, and because they have higher interest rates, and so you're getting more, more bang for your buck. Also, another thing is when you look at, for example, especially as I was talking with inflation earlier, is because in the US, yes, we have high inflation, but when you compare inflation to other countries like in Europe, where they're already into the double-digit inflation, I do believe that we are also in the double digit, but hey, it is what it is. But then if we compare to whatever official numbers that we have way lower inflation than other countries, right? And so that pretty much shows that, hey, the US dollar is a lot more stable versus the other currencies, because right now the other currencies are literally just have been literally plunging and plummeting while the US dollar, because of the others plummeting, kind of went up in value, or basically just stayed wherever it's at relative to the others. It's like basically it's increasing its value because the others are going down, where the US dollar could have just been staying at wherever value it was before, but compared to the others, it's higher. And so those are some of the reasons that are making the US dollar super strong there. And then the last thing too is, as I said earlier, because the US dollar is considered a safe haven, one of the reasons that it's also considered a safe haven is because it is backed by the US government. And the US government is trusted by many people around the world, and also because the US government is less likely to default on their debt. So what I mean by defaulting on their debt, because we all know that the US government has debt in the trillions. I believe it's like 20 something trillion dollar, right? And the US government has never failed to pay on those payments. And that is what I mean by defaulting. And because they have that trust of always making the payment and never defaulting, that also gives the value of like, hey, this is a safe haven, meaning that if I put my money in there, I'm going to be able to at least conserve its value, if not increase its value compared to other currencies. So now, as we now kind of understand what is going on with the dollar. So now what are the ramifications that the US dollar have had on companies and also world economies? So guys, a strong dollar is bad for business because more than 50% of the international trade are done in dollars. Even debt denominated assets. What I mean by debt denominated assets, basically what I'm saying that any assets that are basically provided overseas are denominated in dollars, meaning that they are basically being provided in dollars or accounted in dollars and not accounted in local currencies in overseas. And so because most of the international trades are done in dollar, when you have a strong dollar, that means it becomes much more expensive for other currency to be able to get their hands on the dollar. And that is a problem. And that's also a problem for US companies, because that means that US company products and services become more expensive overseas. And that is a problem, because if overseas people have already have economic pressure and financial pressure because of everything that is going on into the world, and then now because the trades are done in dollar, everyone wants to have their hands on the dollar, but it's now cost you 5 times more, or well, not exactly 5 times more, but I'm just trying to illustrate what I mean. It now costs you 5 times more to be able to get the same dollar that you would get 2 years ago at much less than that. And that is a problem. And that also becomes a problem for US companies. Why? Because US companies will also feel basically the ramifications of that into their earnings, because all of the sales that US company do overseas, because if they're doing those sales in those local currencies, what happens is for earnings, they have to pretty much now exchange all those foreign currency into the US dollar. But then what happens is the exchange rate back into the US dollar is much lower. So US companies also experiences lower revenue. And that is a problem, because lower revenue leads to lower margin, leads to some company deciding to lay off, leads to, lower growth. And that is a problem because it takes a toll on the economy, on the US economy, which is why we have fears of recession. We have big tech company also literally, especially when you look at Meta, guys, it hurts. That stock is just plummeting because they have been losing revenue bad. And I know it's not just because of the US dollar. There is also many other reasons why that's happening over there. Those are public. I'm sure you've probably read all about it on the internet, or maybe it's just me. But anyway, And so this is what I wanted to basically kind of convey today and try to make you understand what it means for the US dollar to be strong. But hey, there is also one benefit for a strong US dollar, because that means that, for example, vacations for Americans overseas are now cheaper, because the same dollar now can afford you maybe 5 times more. Not exactly that, but just for illustrations, than it would a year ago. And so I hope that I provided you with enough value in this video. And if that was the case, please allow me to ask you to hit the like button, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell, as it helps us with YouTube algorithm to get our message to a wider audience. Thanks, and I'll see y'all in my next video on Sunday. Bye.